The silence of the penthouse was a physical thing. It had weight and texture, a high, cold hum that vibrated in the bones of anyone who entered. For Ilara, the silence was a canvas. She arrived each Tuesday and Friday at dawn, while the city below was still a sleepy watercolor of gray and bruised purple, and she worked to restore the silence to its purest form. She did not clean so much as she curated the emptiness. Her work was a ritual of precision. Microfiber cloths separated by color for different surfaces. A custom-blended cleaning solution with notes of white tea and bergamot that dissipated without a trace. Her movements were a quiet ballet, efficient and graceful, learned over years of making herself small and unobtrusive. She was the ghost that polished the glass, the whisper that banished the dust. The penthouse, owned by a mysterious and perpetually absent Mr. Park, was her sanctuary and her prison. It was a monument to a life she could observe but never inhabit, a collection of beautiful, sterile objects she was paid to touch but never to own. She knew the place intimately. She knew the way the morning light struck the Brancusi sculpture, casting a long, bird-like shadow across the Italian marble floor. She knew the exact number of steps from the kitchen to the vast wraparound terrace. She knew the specific gravity of the leather-bound books in the library, books whose spines she had straightened 1,000 times but whose pages she had never dared to open. They were not for her. Her life was a study in such boundaries. The invisible lines between what was hers and what was not. The line between her apartment, small and cluttered with the ghosts of a past she was trying to escape, and this palace in the sky. The line between the woman she was, thoughtful, intelligent, a former architectural student with a sketchbook full of forgotten dreams, and the role she performed, the cleaner, silent, and efficient. The most painful line, however, was the one that had recently been drawn, the one between her and Marcus. Marcus, who had once filled her world with loud promises and even louder declarations of love, had become the source of a different kind of noise. The grating sound of resentment, the sharp, ugly crack of his anger. She had left him 3 weeks ago, packing a single bag in the dead of night, escaping not a home, but a cage he had been slowly, expertly constructing around her. She thought about him as she polished the vast, frameless window overlooking the city. She thought about the way he'd belittled her work. My brilliant architect scrubbing floors. It's poetic, isn't it? He had not seen the poetry. He had only seen the humiliation, and he had enjoyed it. He had enjoyed her diminishment because it made him feel larger. He had not updated the file on her. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate, a version where her quietness was weakness and her patience was surrender. The chime of the private elevator was a violation. It was a sound that never occurred when she was there. Her schedule was precise. Mr. Park was in Seoul or London or another dimension. He was an email address that approved her invoices, not a physical presence. The silence shattered, and a cold dread, sharp and familiar, coiled in her stomach. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper. It was not Mr. Park. It was Marcus. He stood there, framed by the polished steel doors, wearing his arrogance like a well-tailored suit. His posture was relaxed, a casual swagger that was entirely performative. He surveyed the vast living space, his eyes skipping over the priceless art and custom furniture, and landed on her. A slow, proprietary smile spread across his face. "There she is," he said, his voice echoing in the curated quiet. "My little runaway, playing Cinderella in her castle." Ilara's hand, holding a soft gray cloth, froze mid-swipe on the glass. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. She had been so careful. She had changed her number. She had told no one where she was working. "How did you find me, Marcus?" Her voice was low, steady. She would not give him the satisfaction of her fear. "It wasn't hard," he scoffed, stepping into the apartment. His shoes, expensive and Italian, made a vulgar sound on the pristine marble. He was a smudge on a clean pane of glass. "I have friends. People owe me favors. You didn't really think you could just disappear, did you?" After everything I've given you?" She straightened up, turning to face him fully. She placed the cloth down on her cart with deliberate care. It was a small act of control in a situation that was spiraling away from her. "I don't owe you anything, Marcus. I left. It's over." "Over?" He laughed, a short, ugly bark of a sound. "Things are over when I say they're over. You have an obligation to me, Alara. We had a life. You don't just throw that away because things get a little complicated." "Complicated?" The word was a flimsy bandage on a gaping wound. "You called it complicated when you smashed my laptop because a professor praised my work. You called it complicated when you lost my portfolio a week before my final review. That wasn't complication, Marcus. That was sabotage." His face darkened. The charming mask slipped, revealing the raw, petulant anger beneath. "I was protecting you. You were getting lost in a fantasy. I was trying to keep you grounded in the real world." "This is my real world," she said, gesturing to the cleaning cart. "The one you helped create. Now, please leave." "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing purr. He began to walk towards her, closing the distance. "I think you need a reminder of how good we were. You're confused. You've been here in this empty museum for too long. You need a little chaos. You need me." "I need you to leave," she repeated, her voice colder this time. She took a step back, her calf bumping into the leg of a chaise lounge. She was cornered. He saw it. His eyes lit up with a predator's glee. "No, I don't think so. I came all this way. You're going to listen to me." He reached for her, his hand closing around her upper arm. His grip was tight, bruising. "You're coming home." "Let go of my arm, Marcus." The command was quiet, but it was steel. He ignored it. "Don't be dramatic. We're leaving." He started to pull her towards the elevator. The smell of his cologne, a scent she once associated with love, now smelled of entitlement and decay. She planted her feet. She would not be moved. "I said, let go." His face contorted in a snarl of frustration. He had expected her to fold, to crumble as she had before. Her resistance was an affront, a personal insult to his power. "You have gotten very brave in your little castle, haven't you? Maybe you need a reminder of your place." His other hand came up fast. The sound of the slap was shockingly loud in the cathedral-like silence of the room. It was a sharp, flat crack like a dead branch snapping. It echoed off the glass and the marble and the cold, indifferent art. Alara's head snapped to the side. 1,000 tiny stars exploded behind her eyes. A hot, stinging pain bloomed across her cheek. The world tilted, the high-frequency hum of the room turning into a deafening roar in her ears. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply stood there, her breath held captive in her lungs, the imprint of his hand a fiery brand on her skin. In the ringing silence that followed the blow, she felt a strange, cold clarity. This was not the worst thing he had ever done. It was just the most public. It was the final, ugly punctuation mark on a story she should have ended long ago. Marcus was breathing heavily, his chest puffed out. He looked not at her, but at his own hand, as if surprised by its betrayal. Then his eyes flickered back to her, a flicker of panic warring with the anger. Not because he was sorry, because he was caught. He had lost control, and he hated it. "See what you made me do?" he hissed, the classic coward's lament. It was then that another sound entered the tableau, a sound so small and out of place that it took a moment for either of them to register it. Clink. The sound of a heavy glass being set down on a stone coaster. It came from the far side of the room, from the shadows of the library alcove that she had yet to clean. "That is enough." The voice was not loud. It was a low, calm baritone, steady as iron wrapped in silk, but it cut through the thick, charged atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. It carried an authority that Marcus's shouting had never possessed, the kind of authority that does not need to be raised to be heard. Marcus froze, his hand still on her arm. He spun around, his face a mask of confusion and indignation. "Who the hell is that? Is that him? Is that Park?" A figure emerged from the shadows. He did not rush. He was not performing. He simply moved into the light, a study in quiet sovereignty. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it seemed to have been woven around him. His hair was black, his features sharp and intelligent. But it was his stillness that was most arresting. In a room built on the principles of minimalist design, he was the most minimalist and most powerful object in it. He radiated the kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. His eyes, dark and observant, were not on Marcus. They were on Alara. They took in her posture, the red mark blooming on her cheek, the defiant set of her jaw. It was a look not of pity, but of assessment, of information being gathered and filed away. "I asked," the man said, his gaze finally shifting to Marcus, "for you to let go of her arm." Marcus, momentarily cowed by the man's presence, quickly regained his bluster. It was his only defense. "And who are you to ask for anything? The boyfriend? The sugar daddy?" He tightened his grip on Alara, pulling her slightly in front of him like a shield. "This is a private matter, between me and my girlfriend." The man's expression did not change. Not a single muscle in his face moved, but the temperature of the room dropped by 10 degrees. "She is not your girlfriend, and you are trespassing in my home." The words hung in the air. My home. Ilara's mind raced. This was Mr. Park, not the elderly, benevolent man she had pictured, but this man, Julian Kang, as the signature on the wire transfers read. Mr. Park was a polite fiction for the building staff. Marcus let out a disbelieving laugh. "Your home? This is a corporate holding, a sterile showpiece. Nobody lives here." "I do," Julian Kang said, his voice still unnervingly calm. He took a single, unhurried step forward. "And you are no longer welcome in it. Security." He did not shout the word. He said it at the same low volume as the rest of his sentences. It was not a call for help. It was a summons, a statement of inevitable outcome. As if summoned from the very walls, 2 men in dark suits materialized by the elevator. They were built like refrigerators and moved with a liquid efficiency that spoke of years of training. There was no wasted motion. They did not speak. They simply flanked the doorway, their presence a silent, immovable fact. Marcus's bravado finally, catastrophically, deflated. The color drained from his face. His swagger collapsed into a clumsy shuffle. He was a peacock who had just realized he was in a cage with a panther. His hand dropped from Alara's arm as if it had been burned. "Now, wait a minute," he stammered, holding up his hands. "There's no need for this. It was just a misunderstanding." Julian Kang's eyes, cold and dark as obsidian, remained on Marcus. "There is no misunderstanding. You entered my home without permission. You assaulted a member of my staff. You have." He paused, letting the weight of the next word settle. "Overstayed." He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the 2 men. They moved. It was not violent. It was simply efficient. One man took Marcus's left arm, the other his right. The grips were firm, non-negotiable. Marcus's sputtering protests died in his throat as he was lifted, his expensive Italian shoes scraping uselessly against the marble. "You can't do this!" he yelped, his voice high with panic. "I'll sue. I'll call the police." "Please do," Julian Kang said, his voice flat. "I will be interested to hear you explain to them why you were here." They had him at the elevator now. One of the men pressed the button. The doors slid open. As they guided him in, Marcus twisted his head, his eyes wild and desperate, locking onto Alara. "Alara, tell them it's a mistake. You'll be back. Give it 3 days. You'll be begging to come back." The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off his frantic, pathetic prophecy. And then there was silence. But it was a different kind of silence now. The clean, curated silence was gone, replaced by a heavy, ringing stillness thick with unspoken things. The echo of the slap, the ghost of Marcus's voice, the towering presence of the man who stood before her. Alara did not look at him. She stared at the spot where Marcus had stood, her body thrumming with adrenaline. Her cheek was on fire. She could feel the welt rising. She wrapped her arms around herself, a reflexive, protective gesture. She felt exposed, humiliated. Her two worlds had collided and the wreckage was all around her. Julian Kang did not speak for a long moment. He was watching her, she knew. She could feel his gaze, not as a violation, but as a quiet, steady pressure. He was assessing the damage. "Are you all right, Miss Bancroft?" he finally asked. His voice was softer now, stripped of the icy command he had used on Marcus. She flinched at her name. He knew her name. Of course he did. She was on the payroll. She was a line item. She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "I'm fine." It was a lie, but it was the only armor she had. "No," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You are not." He moved then, not towards her, but to a panel on the wall. He pressed a button. "Anna," he said into the intercom, "please bring the first aid kit from the master bathroom to the main living area. And a glass of brandy." There was a faint, tinny reply. "Right away, Mr. Kang." He turned back to her. "Please, sit down." He gestured to the chaise lounge she had backed into earlier. It felt less like a request and more like a diagnosis. He had seen the trembling in her legs that she was trying so hard to control. She sank onto the soft leather, her knees giving way with a gratitude that shamed her. She finally looked at him. Really looked at him. His face was unreadable, a mask of calm composure. But his eyes were full of a quiet, focused intensity. He was not looking at her as a victim. He was looking at her as a problem to be solved, an equation to be balanced. A moment later, a woman in a crisp, dark uniform entered, carrying a medical kit and a heavy crystal glass containing amber liquid. She moved with the same quiet efficiency as the security men. She placed the items on the glass coffee table in front of Alara and then retreated without a word. The efficient subordinate. Julian Kang knelt in front of the coffee table. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car, and he was kneeling on the floor. The gesture was so unexpected it startled her. He opened the kit and took out a sterile wipe and a small, round container. "This may be cold," he said, his voice low. He reached out, not with the wipe, but with his hand, stopping an inch from her face. It was a gesture of permission, a question. She hesitated for only a second. Then she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. His fingers were cool against her jaw as he gently turned her face to the light. His touch was feather-light, clinical, yet strangely grounding. He examined the angry red mark on her cheek with an unnerving focus. He did not say, "That looks bad," or "He'll pay for this," or any of the other useless platitudes. He simply observed. Then he took the wipe and began to clean the area with slow, methodical movements. The antiseptic stung, but the coolness was a relief. He worked in silence, his brow furrowed in concentration. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap, something woody and expensive. She could see the fine weave of his suit, the subtle pattern of the silk tie. She was closer to this powerful, dangerous stranger than she had been to anyone in weeks. He finished cleaning and opened the small container. It was a thick, soothing balm. He applied it with the tip of his finger, his touch still impossibly gentle. "This will help with the swelling and prevent bruising," he explained, his voice a low murmur. "Mostly." He pulled back, his work done. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "He has done this before." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. He had seen it in the way she stood, the way she braced for the blow, the way she didn't scream. He had read the entire history of her relationship with Marcus in that single ugly moment. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in her eyes. The tears she had refused to shed for Marcus. She now shed for this stranger's quiet, devastating perception. He had seen her. Not the cleaner, not the victim, but the survivor of a long, quiet war. A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the balm on her cheek. He did not try to comfort her. He did not offer empty words. He simply took a handkerchief from his jacket pocket, a pristine white square of linen, and held it out to her. She took it. The fabric was cool and smooth. She pressed it to her eyes, a small, grateful sob escaping her lips. He stood up and picked up the brandy glass. "Drink this," he said, holding it out. She shook her head. "I don't drink." "Tonight you do," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "It is for shock." She took the glass. Her hands were shaking so badly the amber liquid sloshed against the sides. She took a small sip. The brandy was smooth and fiery, burning a path down her throat, chasing away some of the icy cold that had settled in her bones. He walked over to the window she had been polishing an eternity ago and looked out at the waking city. "You cannot go back to your apartment," he said, his back to her. "I have to. My things." "Your things will be collected and brought to you," he stated, as if arranging for a delivery. "He knows where you live. He will go there. He is predictable in his stupidity." "I can't stay here," she said, a new wave of panic rising. To be indebted to this man, to be under his roof, it felt like trading one cage for another, albeit a much more gilded one. He turned from the window. "I agree. This is not a home. It is a waiting room. You will not be staying here." He paused. "I am taking you to my family's estate, just outside the city. You will be safe there." "Your family?" she whispered, bewildered. "My grandmother," he clarified. "She is expecting you." "Expecting me? How could she be expecting me?" The world was tilting on its axis again. He finally offered a piece of the puzzle. "Miss Vancroft, Ilara, I have been aware of you for some time, not just as an employee. My grandmother and I have been following your work." "My work?" She was utterly lost. "My cleaning?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "No, your real work. The work you were doing before. Marcus." He gestured towards the library. "The architectural journals, the books on urban planning and sustainable design. I did not order those. You did." She stared at him, dumbfounded. It was true. Weeks ago, using the household account she was permitted to use for supplies, she had, in a fit of desperate nostalgia, ordered a few obscure trade publications. She had assumed no one noticed. She assumed no one cared. "I saw the orders," he continued. "I was, intrigued. I looked into your background, the scholarship to the city's top architecture program, the glowing recommendations, the sudden withdrawal for personal reasons." He looked at her, his gaze direct. "He was your personal reason, wasn't he?" She could only nod, her throat tight. "I suspected as much," he said. He had not just seen her, he had investigated her. He had a file, but unlike Marcus, his file was accurate. He was working from the latest version. "My family's company, Kang Industries, has a large development division. We are always looking for new talent, for fresh eyes. My grandmother, who still holds a controlling interest and a very sharp opinion, believed your eye was particularly fresh. She was the one who insisted we keep you close." This was too much. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and shock and a strange, disorienting relief. She had not been a ghost. She had been observed, watched over, by a powerful unseen force, by a quiet sovereign and his queen mother. "So, this was all some kind of test?" she asked, the words tasting bitter. "No," he said immediately, his voice sharp with something that sounded like regret. "This," he gestured to the room, to her face, "was a failure. My failure. I should have intervened sooner. I underestimated his capacity for pathetic violence. I apologize." The apology, so simple and direct, struck her more forcefully than the slap had. Marcus had never apologized for anything. Julian Kang, a man who could buy and sell the entire city block they were standing on, was apologizing to her. He picked up a sleek black phone from a side table. He tapped the screen. "My car is waiting downstairs. We should go before the sun is fully up." He looked at her, his expression softening for the first time. "It is time for a new beginning, Alara, one of your own design." The days that followed were a blur of disorientation and quiet grace. The estate was not a mansion. It was a world, a sprawling compound of traditional Korean-style houses and modern glass and steel structures, connected by serene gardens, koi ponds, and stone pathways. It was a place where the silence was not empty, but full of the sound of wind chimes, rustling bamboo, and distant flowing water. It was a fortress built of peace. She was met at the gate by his grandmother. Halmoni, as everyone called her, was a tiny woman with eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 years and a grip like a vice. She was dressed in a traditional handbook of pale silk. She took one look at the fading bruise on Alara's cheek, then at her grandson. She said something to Julian in rapid, sharp Korean, her tone leaving no doubt it was a scolding. He bowed his head slightly. "Yes, Halmoni, I was too slow." Then the old woman turned to Alara. She took Alara's hands in her own. Her skin was soft as old paper. "You are safe now, child," she said, her English accented but clear. "This is your home for as long as you need it. There is good tea, and the library is better than my grandson's. He has no taste, all business, no soul." Julian, the feared head of Kang Industries, the man who had dismissed Marcus with a single word, simply sighed. "Hello to you too, grandmother." Alara was given a small house of her own, a beautiful structure of wood and glass that overlooked a tranquil garden. Her things, as promised, arrived the next day, packed in new, expensive-looking boxes. Among them, rescued from the back of her closet, was her old sketchbook. When she opened it, she found a new set of professional-grade drawing pencils lying on the first blank page. There was no note. There didn't need to be. She spent the first week healing. She slept for long, dreamless hours. She walked the garden paths, letting the quiet beauty of the place slowly sand down the sharp edges of her trauma. She ate meals with Halmoni, who told her stories of the old country, of building an empire from nothing, of the importance of knowing your own worth. "Men like your Marcus," she said one afternoon over barley tea, "are like cheap porcelain, loud and shiny, but they crack under the slightest pressure. My Julian, he is iron. He does not bend, but he can be shaped if the fire is hot enough." Julian was a quiet, constant presence. He was not there, and then he was. He would appear in the garden as she was sketching, holding a cup of tea for her. He would sit with her in the library, not speaking, but sharing the comfortable silence, each of them engrossed in their own books. He never asked about Marcus. He never asked about her past. He only asked about the future. "What are you drawing?" he asked one evening, looking over her shoulder at the sketchbook. She had started designing, not for any project, but for herself. She was drawing buildings that breathed, spaces that flowed, structures that were integrated with nature. She was reclaiming the part of herself that Marcus had tried to kill. "Just an idea," she said, suddenly shy. "A community center, a place for people to gather, with a rooftop garden." He looked at the drawing for a long time, his expression unreadable. "The load-bearing walls here," he said, pointing with a long, elegant finger, "would be better served if they were integrated with the central pillar. It would open up the entire lower floor." It was the most exciting conversation she'd had in years. They talked for hours, debating materials, sightlines, the flow of human traffic. He was not just a businessman. He understood design, structure, and form. He saw the vision behind her sketches. He challenged her, pushed her, and for the first time since she had left school, she felt like an architect again. Meanwhile, in the world outside their peaceful fortress, Julian Kang was moving with unhurried, devastating precision. Alara was unaware of the specifics, but she felt the ripples. A brief, cryptic phone call overheard. The zoning variance? Denied. The inspectors found irregularities. A quiet meeting in the garden with men in suits who left looking pale. A news report on the financial channel about a mid-level development firm, Thorn Development, suddenly facing a credit crisis. Julian was not just protecting her. He was systematically dismantling Marcus's world. He was not using thugs or violence. He was using the far more brutal weapons of the boardroom, leveraged buyouts, credit defaults, and regulatory compliance. He was pulling out the structural supports of Marcus's life, one by one, and waiting for the whole flimsy edifice to collapse. One evening, a lawyer, a prim woman with a severe haircut, came to the estate. She met with Alara in the library. Julian was present, but he stood by the window, a silent observer. "Miss Vancroft," the lawyer began, "I am from the firm of Lee, Park and Cho. We represent Kang Industries. Mr. Kang has instructed me to inform you that Mr. Thorne has filed a frivolous and frankly laughable lawsuit against you for emotional distress and the theft of shared property." Ilara's blood ran cold. He can't be serious. "Oh, he is," the lawyer said with a thin smile. "Arrogance is a powerful hallucinogen. However, you need not worry. We have filed a countersuit for assault, battery, and harassment. We have the security footage from the Penthouse. We also have a sworn affidavit from the building manager, to whom Mr. Thorne attempted to offer a bribe for your schedule. We have his text messages. We have everything." The lawyer slid a thick folder across the table. "This is a restraining order. It has already been granted. If he comes within 500 feet of you, he will be arrested. This," she slid another folder, "is a settlement offer. It is generous to a fault. It cedes all claims to any property and provides you with a significant sum for damages. All he has to do is sign it and disappear." "Will he sign it?" Ilara asked, her voice a whisper. The lawyer glanced at Julian. Julian gave a slight shake of his head. "No," the lawyer said, turning back to Ilara. "He will not. He will see it as a sign of weakness. He will believe he can still win. He is a fool, and his foolishness will be his ruin." The lawyer was right. Marcus rejected the settlement. He doubled down. He gave an interview to a sleazy gossip blog, painting himself as the victim, a man whose mentally unstable girlfriend had been stolen away by a powerful, shadowy tycoon. He was trying to fight a war of whispers and innuendo against a man who commanded armies. The final act was set for the Obsidian Gala, the annual charity event hosted by Kang Industries. It was the absolute pinnacle of the city's social and financial calendar. To be invited was a sign of arrival. To be uninvited was a death sentence. "I want you to come," Julian said to her a week before the event. "As my guest." "I can't," she said, her old fear returning. "All those people. They'll stare. They'll whisper." "They will," he agreed, his voice calm. "They will look at you, and they will see a brilliant, beautiful woman standing next to me. They will see strength. They will see grace. The whispers will be of envy, not of scorn." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "But you will not be my guest. You will be my partner." He unrolled a set of blueprints on the large library table. It was a massive urban renewal project, a plan to revitalize a derelict waterfront district. It was ambitious, visionary, and beautiful. "This is our new flagship project," he said. "Project Nightingale. And this," he pointed to a stunning central building that was a clear evolution of the sketches she had been working on, "is the centerpiece. The Nightingale Center for Arts and Community, designed by you." She stared at the blueprints, at her own ideas transformed and magnified. Her name in the title block, Ilara Vancroft, lead architect. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," he said simply. "Say you will stand with me, not behind me, beside me. Let the world see who you are." The night of the Obsidian Gala arrived. The ballroom was a cavern of black marble and shimmering crystal. The most powerful people in the city were there, draped in jewels and couture. A string quartet played something by Vivaldi. Ilara stood beside Julian, her hand resting on his arm. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, a color that was no longer the shade of her servitude, but of her rebirth. The dress was architecturally precise, a custom design that made her feel not just beautiful, but powerful. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck. The bruise was long gone. There was no trace of the woman who had polished floors in fear. People did stare, they did whisper, but Julian had been right. He introduced her not as his date, but as his partner, the architect of his most important new project. He spoke of her talent with a quiet pride that silenced any potential gossip. She was not his possession. She was his equal. She was speaking with a city councilwoman about green roofing initiatives when she felt a chill run down her spine. The conversations around them faltered. The music seemed to dip in volume. A disturbance was moving through the placid sea of the city's elite. And then she saw him. Marcus was standing at the entrance to the ballroom. He was not on the guest list, but he had somehow bullied or bribed his way past the outer security. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he radiated an aura of stale liquor and desperation. He was scanning the crowd, his face a mask of raw, frantic fury. And then his eyes found her. He started moving towards them, a heat-seeking missile of pure resentment. The crowd parted before him as if he were a leper. Julian, who had been speaking to the mayor, turned his head slowly. He saw Marcus. His expression did not change, but Alara felt the muscles in his arm tense. It was the calm before the storm. "Stay here," he murmured to her. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I don't leave because things become complicated." She squeezed his arm. "Beside you, not behind you." A flicker of something, pride, admiration, crossed his face. He nodded once. Marcus reached to them. He ignored Julian completely, his wild eyes fixed on Alara. "There you are," he slurred, grabbing her arm, the same arm as before. It was a pathetic echo of their last encounter. "I knew I'd find you, hiding behind him. You have an obligation to me, Alara. You owe me. That was my life you helped him destroy. My life!" The room was utterly silent now. The string quartet had fallen quiet. Every eye was on them. This was the moment Marcus had wanted, a public confrontation. He believed he was exposing her, shaming her. He had no idea he was stepping onto his own execution platform. "Take your hand off her, Marcus," Julian said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Or what?" Marcus sneered, his face inches from Julian's. "You'll have your goons throw me out? You think you're so powerful? You're nothing. You hide in your towers. I built things with my hands." Julian looked at Marcus, and for the first time Alara saw a flicker of something other than calm in his eyes. It was a cold, surgical pity. "You're right," Julian said, and the unexpected agreement made Marcus blink. "I don't build things with my hands. I own things, and at the moment, Marcus, I own you." Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out not a weapon, but his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up for Marcus to see. "This is a confirmation from my family office," he began, his voice a calm, clear monologue that carried through the silent room. "As of 3 hours ago, we concluded the acquisition of the holding company that owned the debt on all 3 of your major commercial properties. Your loans have been called in. Your lines of credit are frozen. Thorn Development is insolvent." Marcus stared at the phone, his mouth hanging open. "No, that's not possible." "Oh, it's quite possible," Julian continued, swiping to another screen. "This is the resignation letter from your lead counsel. He'll be sending you a bill for his time, which, by the way, my firm has already paid. He now works for me. His first piece of advice to me was that your lawsuit against Miss Vancroft was, and I quote, a master class in legal malpractice and self-sabotage." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. This was better than theater. "Your apartment," Julian went on, his voice relentless, "was a rental. Your lease was terminated this afternoon for multiple violations of the building's code of conduct. Your belongings are currently in a storage unit in New Jersey. The first month is paid. After that, it's your problem." Marcus was shaking his head, a low, keening sound escaping his lips. "And finally," Julian said, putting the phone away, "your reputation." He gestured to the room, to the powerful, watching faces. "You came here tonight to cause a scene, to humiliate a good woman and challenge a man you do not understand. You have succeeded only in writing the final chapter of your own story. You are not a victim. You are not a tragic hero. You are just a liability, a bad investment. And we, he gestured to the room again, do not carry bad investments. He had used the language Marcus understood, the language of assets and liabilities, of profit and loss. He had audited Marcus's life and found it worthless. The finality of it all seemed to hit Marcus at once. The arrogance, the bluster, the rage, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, terrified man. His hand dropped from Alara's arm. His face, which had been red with fury, was now a pasty, sickly white. His legs gave out. He crumpled to the floor, dropping to his knees on the cold marble, a broken man in a ruined suit. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob. Loud, ugly, gasping sobs of utter defeat. Julian looked down at him for a moment, his expression one of faint distaste. Then he turned to his security chief, who had appeared at his elbow. See that our uninvited guest gets the medical attention he clearly needs. And a taxi to New Jersey. Yes, Mr. Kang. The security men moved in, lifting the sobbing Marcus to his feet and guiding him discreetly from the room. The show was over. The buzz of conversation started up again, hesitant at first, then a roar. Julian turned to the stunned crowd. He took Alara's hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and raised it slightly. My apologies for the interruption, he said, his voice now carrying a formal weight. He stepped towards the small stage where the quartet had been playing and took a microphone. I had intended to do this later in the evening, but there is no time like the present. His eyes found Alara in the crowd. He was not looking at her as a lover, but as a colleague, a partner. He was giving her the one thing Marcus had always denied her: public validation. For years, Kang Industries has been a company of steel and glass, of finance and logistics. We have built towers that scrape the sky, but a city is more than its skyline. It is its heart. Tonight, I am pleased to announce a new direction for our company. A project not of steel, but of soul. Project Nightingale. He spoke about the project, about revitalizing the waterfront, about creating community spaces. And then he said the words that would change her life forever. A project of this magnitude requires a singular vision, a guiding hand with the talent not just to build, but to dream. It has been my profound privilege to work with a mind so brilliant. It has reshaped my own understanding of what is possible. She has been the most capable person in every room she has ever entered, whether she was there to clean it or to redesign it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the chief architect of Project Nightingale, my partner, Miss Alara Vancroft. He held out his hand to her. The applause was deafening. 100 of the most powerful people in the city were on their feet, applauding her. For her. Not for her beauty, not for the man she was with, but for her mind, her talent. She walked towards the stage, moving through the applause as if it were a warm current. She took his hand. The light was bright. She looked out at the sea of faces and saw not judgment, but respect. She looked at Julian, who was smiling at her, a real, genuine smile that reached his dark, observant eyes. The weight of her past, the years of being underestimated, of being made small, of enduring in silence, it all lifted. It floated away on the wave of applause, disappearing into the crystal and marble night. It was a slow, deep exhale she had been holding for a decade. Later that night, they stood on the terrace of the penthouse. Her penthouse, their penthouse. The city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The silence was back, but it was a shared silence now, comfortable and full. She was not there to clean it. She was there to inhabit it. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, his touch solid and reassuring. You didn't have to ruin him, she said softly, not as an accusation, but as an observation. Yes, I did, he replied, his voice a low rumble against her ear. Some foundations are rotten. You cannot build on them. You must tear them down completely before you can begin again. He paused. He was a threat to my most valuable asset. Project Nightingale? She asked. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her arms. No, he said, his eyes serious. You. She looked up at him, at this quiet, powerful man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had valued her when she was dismissed, who had fought a silent, ruthless war on her behalf, her protector, her partner, her sovereign. A real smile touched her lips, reaching her eyes for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "So," she said, a playful light dancing in her eyes. "What comes next?" Julian Kang, the man who controlled a global empire, the man who never showed emotion, looked down at the woman who was the architect of his future, and he smiled back. "I was hoping you would tell me."